I lived with him under the same roof. But every day I felt like an enemy. Today I ran away. Mike and I met at a mutual friend's birthday party in Austin on one of those sticky summer nights where the air buzzes with music, laughter, and the kind of energy that makes everything feel a little more alive. The backyard was strung with lights, the drinks were flowing, and I had just settled into a conversation with someone I barely knew when I felt something cold splash across my arm and down the front of my dress. I looked up in surprise to see a man standing there with wide eyes and an empty glass, already reaching for napkins and stammering apologies before I could even say a word. He looked genuinely mortified, his cheeks flushed and his hand shaking slightly as he handed me a cocktail napkin like it might somehow undo the mess. He offered to buy me another drink and I agreed, mostly because the way he said it made me laugh. Half nervous, half charming, like someone who wasn't used to messing up but wanted to make it right. We ended up standing by the bar for the rest of the night, talking about everything from our favorite movies to how we both secretly hated group games at parties but played along to be polite. There was something easy about him, something unfiltered and warm, like talking to someone I'd known for years even though I'd just met him. A few weeks later we were inseparable. And a year after that night, after countless late-night drives, takeout dinners, shared books, and quiet mornings wrapped in each other's arms, we moved in together. It felt right in a way I didn't question, like the next natural breath in a story that was writing itself. Mike seemed perfect in every way that mattered. Funny without trying too hard, kind in the small moments that no one else noticed, reliable in the quiet, grounding way that made me feel like I could finally exhale. He remembered how I took my coffee, left sticky notes with inside jokes on the bathroom mirror, and always answered the phone, even if it was just to say he was too tired to talk. For the first year, I thought I had somehow stumbled into something rare, something solid, something safe. But my illusion started to crack the day I met his family, especially his older sister, Darla. It happened over a long weekend in his hometown, the kind of visit that was supposed to be warm and filled with laughter, the kind where you show up with a pie and leave with old photos and new inside jokes. Instead, what I walked into felt more like an unspoken war zone, carefully masked with politeness and half-forced smiles. Darla greeted me at the door with a look that wasn't quite a smile, more of a scan, like she was assessing a threat rather than welcoming a guest. Her handshake was limp, her tone clipped, and from the first hour, I felt like I was on trial for a crime I didn't know I was being accused of. She was poised, sharp-tongued in a way that came off as witty at first but slowly unraveled into something colder. Every compliment had an edge, every question felt like it was digging for something to use later, and I realized quickly that Darla wasn't just protective, she was territorial. And in her eyes, I was the outsider, the intruder, the one threatening the delicate hierarchy she had no intention of sharing. And no matter how much Mike tried to smooth things over, I could feel it beginning, the slow erosion of the perfect picture I had painted in my mind. Darla is the undisputed queen of passive aggression, the kind of person who smiles through gritted teeth while delivering the kind of comment that leaves you questioning whether you're imagining the insult or just too polite to call it out. She's 37, divorced, with 2 children she constantly mentions but rarely seems genuinely connected to, and every conversation with her somehow circles back to how hard her life is. She complains about everything, her job, her ex, the price of groceries, her neighbors, but never actually does anything to change her circumstances. It's as if she's built an identity around struggle but refuses to take a single step toward solving any of it. Her real hobby, though, is dramatizing the most mundane conflicts and turning them into long, cryptic monologues on social media. She crafts vague posts filled with quotes about loyalty and betrayal, never naming names but always making it clear that someone in her life has wronged her, and inviting a chorus of comments that ask, "What happened?" just so she can bask in the performance of victimhood. She thrives on conflict but never admits she starts it, always playing the wounded party while leaving a trail of tension and resentment behind her like it's perfume. Being around her feels like walking on glass you can't see, everything looks fine until it cuts you. One day, after a family dinner that had already been tense from the moment we walked in, Darla completely unraveled over a bowl of mashed potatoes that hadn't been salted to her liking, slamming her fork down and muttering loud enough for the entire table to hear that some people just don't care about others' standards. The room went quiet. Mike tried to change the subject, and his mother nervously offered her a different dish, but the damage had already been done. Darla sat back with her arms crossed like a teenager punished for nothing, glaring at anyone who dared look her way, as if the entire evening had been a personal attack orchestrated just to upset her. Later, in the kitchen while helping clear the plates, I turned to Mike's mom, who looked visibly exhausted, her smile long since faded, and quietly said, "Maybe Darla just needs to find something to focus on. A job, a hobby. Something to distract her from looking for problems." It wasn't meant as an insult, but it came out sharper than I intended, sharpened by months of watching Darla lash out at everyone while doing absolutely nothing to improve her own situation. That was the end of that. The look Mike's mother gave me was a strange mix of surprise and silence, like I'd just said something people had thought but no one had dared to speak aloud. From that moment forward, everything shifted, small, subtle changes at first, but I could feel the freeze starting. And I knew deep down that I had just crossed a line in a family that didn't like the truth spoken plainly. Darla twisted my words in a way that only someone practiced in manipulation could, turning a passing comment made in quiet frustration into a full-blown character assassination, painting me as the villain with such skill that by the end of the week, I had somehow become the enemy of the entire family. She told everyone that I had called her lazy, that I had accused her of being mentally unstable, that I had mocked her struggles and dismissed her pain with cruelty, none of which I had actually said. But it didn't matter. She told the story with conviction, layered it with just enough emotion and just enough fake vulnerability to make it believable, and soon the whispers started. Mike's relatives stopped replying to my messages. His cousins, who used to laugh with me at family gatherings, now avoided eye contact. Even his mom, who had once seemed to accept me, grew quiet and stiff around me, her warmth gone. And worst of all, what still sits in the center of my chest like a cold stone, Mike just swallowed it all in silence. He didn't defend me. He didn't speak up. He didn't sit his sister down and correct the lie. He just let the narrative take hold, like he was afraid of stirring up more conflict or worse, afraid of choosing sides. And in his silence I felt abandoned not just by him, but by the version of us I thought was stronger than this. Since then I became an outcast at every family event, a presence no one acknowledged, a name left off every invitation list, as if pretending I didn't exist was easier than facing the lie that had been allowed to spread unchecked. When I did show up, on the rare occasions when Mike insisted on bringing me, I was met with cold nods, brief glances, and conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. No one asked how I was doing, no one offered me a seat, and I quickly learned how to hover near the edge of every gathering, smiling politely through the sting of being treated like I didn't belong. Even Tim, Mike's younger brother, who had once laughed with me over beers and sent me memes late at night and told me more than once that I was the best thing that had ever happened to his brother, suddenly stopped talking to me altogether. He didn't respond to my messages, didn't make eye contact at gatherings, and acted like there had never been a friendship between us at all. It was as if Darla's version of the story had become scripture, and questioning it meant being cast out with me. The silence from everyone else was loud, but Tim's silence was something deeper. It felt like betrayal wrapped in fear, like he had chosen safety over truth, and I was left standing alone in a place where I had once believed I could build a home. What struck me most wasn't just that Mike kept quiet through it all, but that at some point, without even realizing it was happening, he actually started agreeing with Darla. He didn't shout or accuse, but his words began to shift, soft at first, coded in that careful tone people use when they're trying to sound reasonable while still breaking your heart. He started telling me that I was too harsh, that maybe I didn't understand family nuances, as if there was something subtle and sacred about being manipulated and mistreated. He told me that Georgia is very sensitive, referring to Darla by her middle name, the one the family used when they were trying to sound formal or forgiving, as if her weaponized tears and cruel whispers were just the byproducts of an emotional temperament I should learn to accommodate. He began defending her in small ways, picking apart my reactions instead of questioning her actions, like I was the one throwing off the balance of things by refusing to let lies live unchallenged. And what hurt more than anything was the way he said it, not with malice, not even with anger, but with this quiet disappointment, like I had somehow failed a test I didn't know I was taking. It wasn't just about Darla anymore, it was about him, and the realization that the man who once stood beside me now stood somewhere else entirely, just far enough away that I no longer felt like we were on the same side. When I was excluded from the guest list for his cousin's wedding, something that was never formally discussed but quietly enforced through silence and omission, Mike didn't protest, didn't question it, didn't even hesitate. He simply accepted it as if it was a matter of logistics instead of loyalty, and told me he'd just go alone, brushing it off with a casual, "It's not a big deal, babe, it's just one night." I had already bought a new dress, a soft satin one in deep emerald green that I had picked out weeks earlier, imagining myself walking into the venue beside him, holding his hand, trying to believe that maybe things were finally starting to shift. I'd even gotten my nails done, curled my hair, and planned to show up looking calm and unbothered, even if I felt anything but. Instead, I stayed home in that dress, sitting on the edge of the bed as the hours crawled by, my phone quiet, my chest aching with something deeper than embarrassment. And when he finally came back, it was nearly midnight. He reeked of whiskey and cigar smoke, his shirt wrinkled, his voice loud and slurred as he stumbled into the apartment grinning, shouting about how great the evening had been, how beautiful the venue was, how much fun everyone had. He didn't notice the dress still hanging on the back of the door or the way my eyes were red from crying. He just laughed and swayed and told me I really should have been there, as if it hadn't been his job to fight for me to be included. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't just been left out of a wedding, I had been left out of his life. He stopped noticing my emotions in a way that felt like erosion, slow and steady, until one day I realized I could cry in front of him and it wouldn't even register. When I told him I was in pain, real, sharp, emotional pain that made it hard to eat or sleep or even breathe some days, he dismissed it as exaggeration, as if my suffering was just a performance I had chosen to stage for attention. He stopped asking if I was okay, stopped listening when I tried to explain, and somewhere along the way stopped caring whether I felt hurt at all. The worst was when I started having arrhythmias again, irregular heartbeats that flared up under stress, something I had experienced before and had medical records to prove. One evening, after a particularly tense phone call with his sister that left me shaking, my heart began racing so fast I had to sit down on the floor just to stay upright. When I told him, when I tried to explain that it wasn't just emotional, that something was actually happening inside my body, he rolled his eyes and said I was faking it, that I just didn't want to deal with conflict, that it was a manipulation tactic wrapped in drama. And in that moment, something cracked deep inside me, not just from the lack of empathy but from the terrifying realization that the person I loved most now saw my pain as an inconvenience rather than a truth. I gradually packed my things into the guest room, doing it piece by piece so it wouldn't look like an exit, folding it into the rhythm of our daily life so it could pass without confrontation. I told him I needed better sleep because of work, said the noise from his late-night YouTube videos and the tossing and turning kept me awake, which wasn't entirely untrue, but it also wasn't the reason. The real reason was that I could no longer lie beside a man who let his family devalue me, who watched me be picked apart and left uninvited, unseen, and unloved, and still chose silence over standing up for me. I couldn't sleep next to someone whose body no longer felt like comfort but like betrayal and skin, someone whose presence didn't bring peace but anxiety, someone who had made it clear, through words and in action, that I would always be expected to shrink to make room for the people who disrespected me. So I moved into the guest room with the quiet desperation of someone trying to survive while still clinging to the idea that maybe, somehow, things could turn back. But every night I lay alone in that room, the distance between us felt more honest than anything we said during the day. The other day I got the keys to my new apartment, a small studio tucked into a quiet corner of North Dallas with creaky floors, mismatched cabinets, and the kind of sunlight that spills in slow and golden through the window every morning. It's not much, but it's mine, and more importantly, it's free of tension, of cold shoulders, of backhanded comments passed through family like weapons. It's a place where I can breathe without second-guessing every word I say, where I don't have to brace myself before walking into a room, where I don't wake up already exhausted from pretending everything is fine. I decided to move out while Mike was at the gym, the one part of his schedule that never changed like clockwork, every weekday from 7 to 9:30 in the morning, rain or shine, no questions asked. I woke up early that day, heart pounding but hands steady, and packed the last of my things with the kind of calm that comes when you've cried all the tears and accepted the ending for what it is. I left behind the guest room sheets folded neatly, the set of keys he gave me on the counter, and a note that didn't try to explain everything, just a few quiet lines that said I needed peace and this wasn't peace anymore. Then I walked out, closed the door softly behind me and didn't look back. I transferred my mail in advance, quietly and methodically, making sure that every envelope and notification would now find its way to my new place and not back to a house that no longer felt like home. I updated my address with the bank, with my job, with every utility and account I could think of, each change another step toward disentangling myself from a life that had grown too heavy to carry. Over the course of a few weeks, I returned during the hours I knew he wouldn't be home, slipping in and out like a ghost to collect my documents, the small things I couldn't bear to leave behind, old notebooks, a few framed photos, the worn sweater I always reached for when I felt most like myself. Then, on the morning I had planned for, I woke early before the sun had fully risen, the house still and silent, and packed the rest of my belongings with a strange sense of calm. I made 2 trips in my old Ford, the first loaded with boxes of books, kitchen utensils, and bags of clothes, the second with the last remaining pieces, my pillow, my favorite mug, the lamp from the nightstand that had always felt like mine. It wasn't glamorous and nothing about it felt triumphant, but it was real and quiet and entirely mine. And as I drove away for the last time, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. After the move, once everything was in place and the last box had been tucked into the corner of my new studio, I sat on the edge of my new bed, still bare, still strange, and composed the message I had been writing in my head for weeks. My hands didn't shake. I didn't reread it a dozen times. I simply typed it out, clear and final, and hit send. I wrote, "Mike, I've left. I'm sorry, but I can no longer be a part of a family that despises me and you approve of it by your silence. Don't come looking for me. My decision is final." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was the truth, the kind that had taken root in me over time until it became impossible to ignore. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want a last-minute plea or another excuse. I just wanted to close the door completely and lock it from the inside. And when I pressed send and placed my phone face down on the table, the quiet that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. His response came quickly, a chaotic stream of messages that shifted tone so violently I could barely tell which version of him I was speaking to. It started with aggression, sharp and cruel, as if the weight of losing control had triggered something mean inside him. He called me frigid, said I was emotionally closed off, that I had pushed him away and ruined everything good in his life. He told me I was selfish, that I never tried hard enough, that I was too sensitive, too cold, too much and never enough all at once. And then not even 10 minutes later the tone changed. Suddenly he was devastated. He wrote that he was broken without me, that he didn't mean any of what he had just said, that he was scared and desperate and that I should have warned him, given him a chance, stayed just a little longer. And then came the promises, scattered between the leftover insults like they might somehow erase the damage. He said he would fix everything, that he would stand up to his family, that he finally saw how much I had endured. He begged me to come back so we could start a family, said we could wipe the slate clean, that this time would be different. But I had seen this version of him before, the one that only showed up after I had reached my breaking point, the one that didn't come from love, but from fear of being alone. I read every word without responding, letting his contradictions speak louder than anything I could have said in return. I blocked him, Darla, his mom, every single number, every account, every thread that tied me back to that world where I was constantly defending myself just to exist. I didn't do it out of spite or anger, but because I finally understood that some people don't deserve access to you once they've proven again and again that they'll only use it to hurt you. And you know what? I finally started to breathe. Not just shallow breaths to get through the day, but deep, full, honest breaths that didn't carry the weight of walking on eggshells or waiting for the next cold comment masked as concern. I started waking up without the crushing sense of guilt that had followed me for so long, without that quiet inner voice asking, "What did I do wrong now?" I stopped questioning every word I said, every emotion I felt, every boundary I set. I stopped trying to twist myself into something softer just to be tolerated. Without them in my ears and in my space, I realized I had been fighting for a place in a story I was never meant to belong to. Now, I choose peace even if I have to do it alone, even if the silence is unfamiliar at first. And it feels good, steady, quiet, healing in a way I forgot was possible. I'm not chasing approval anymore. I'm just living. And for the first time in years it feels like enough.